I once had a quiet conversation with a man named Daniel. He was in his early 50s. On paper, his life looked complete. A successful career, a beautiful home by the ocean, and the dream car he'd once taped on his fridge during his younger years. That day, Daniel sat silently in the meditation room for quite some time. Then he finally spoke. He said, "I did everything they told me to do. Study hard, work harder, save, invest, build a good life. But this morning, I woke up in this beautiful house, and all I felt was this strange emptiness. It's not loud, but it lingers like a shadow I can't shake." I've heard that kind of story more times than I can count, from very different people, some at the height of success, some going through divorce, some newly retired. And over time, I began to notice something. The question, "What am I living for?" doesn't always show up when things fall apart. It often shows up right after we get what we thought we wanted and realize it's still not enough. Have you ever achieved something you dreamed of, only to quietly ask yourself, "Now what?" If so, you're not alone. There's this moment I'll never forget, reading something Jim Carrey once said. Yes, the famous actor, one of the richest and most successful comedians in America. In an interview, he said, "I wish everyone could be rich and famous and have everything they ever dreamed of, so they'd realize that's not the answer." That line hit me hard. It's an honest truth coming from someone who reached the top of a mountain many people spend their lives climbing. It reminded me of Leonardo da Vinci, the genius of all time. On his deathbed, he whispered, "I feel I have offended both God and mankind, because my work did not reach the quality it should have." He painted the Mona Lisa. He envisioned machines centuries ahead of his time, and yet he still felt incomplete. Even Steve Jobs, who reshaped the tech world, once shared that his deepest regret wasn't about business, it was about time he missed with family. So maybe we've misunderstood from the very beginning what really makes a life feel whole. Maybe we're walking in the wrong direction and don't even realize it. That brings me back to the Buddha. Over 2,500 years ago, he was a prince. He had everything: luxury, power, pleasure, ease. But then one day, he saw an old man, a sick person, and a corpse, and something awakened in him. He realized, no matter how beautiful the pleasures, they all end in suffering. And so, he walked away from it all, not to escape life, but to understand it, to find out why humans suffer, to uncover the truth behind our endless chasing. Because the truth is, we're not really running toward happiness. We're running away from discomfort inside us. We eat, not because food brings enlightenment, but because we're hungry. We buy things, fall in love, seek thrills, and then feel empty again, like something's still missing. It's like scratching an itch and mistaking that for joy. But no matter how much we scratch, the itch never really goes away. The reason you may feel unhappy isn't because you don't have enough. It might be because you're treating the wrong wound. 3 stories, 3 snapshots of life. A man surrounded by wealth but feeling hollow. Geniuses who look back on their lives with nameless regret. And an enlightened teacher who left a kingdom behind to find a deeper truth many of us still haven't seen. They all lead us back to the same simple question, one that never really gets old, and one that has the power to wake us up every time we dare to ask it honestly. What are we living for? If that question has ever stirred inside your heart even once, then I invite you to come along with me in today's reflection. We're going to look deeply at why we continue to suffer, even when all our needs are met. why happiness feels like a shadow. The harder we chase it, the more it slips away. And most importantly, what path did the Buddha offer us? A path not meant to run away from life, but to live it with awareness, peace, and real freedom. So if you're ready, let's begin here. Let's take a gentle breath and start by looking into the very mechanism of suffering itself and the first noble truth the Buddha gave humanity, not to scare you, but to help you see clearly that there is a way out, step by step, breath by breath, one mindful choice at a time. 1. Awakening begins with an inner question. There's a moment in life that seems ordinary, but it has the power to change everything. It's not always triggered by a big shock, not after a painful loss or major failure. Sometimes it happens on a quiet afternoon. You're sitting alone, right after accomplishing something you thought would make you proud. And then, out of nowhere, a question rises from deep inside. So, what now? That question isn't loud. It's not dramatic like thunder. It's more like a soft knock on a door, quiet, but unmistakably real. Strangely enough, it often shows up right after moments that were supposed to be joyful. A birthday celebration, a long vacation, a promotion at work, or paying off a debt that weighed on you for years. But instead of feeling the happiness you expected, there's this thin layer of stillness, just enough space for the mind to quietly ask, what am I really living for? Did this actually make me feel lighter? More at peace? Now, not everyone notices that voice. In today's world, most people are too busy trying not to hear it. Some turn on the television. Some call a friend. Some throw themselves into the next task, as if they're running from a shadow. But for just a few, that question doesn't go away. It stays. It lingers. It's subtle, but persistent. And from that moment, something inside begins to shift. It's quiet. It's not flashy, but it's deep. The Buddha called this a wholesome seed, a spiritual potential that's already within us. It just lies dormant until the stillness gives it room to rise. There's a small story in the sutras that comes to mind. One day, the Buddha was sitting in the forest with his monks. A layman came to him, bowed respectfully, and asked, "Bhagavan, what makes an ordinary person suddenly wish to leave behind their old life and seek the truth?" The Buddha didn't answer right away. Instead, he gently picked up a dried leaf by his foot and asked, "What do you see in this leaf?" The man looked closely and said, "It looks fragile." The Buddha smiled and replied, "Yes, and so is human life, fragile and fleeting. When a person starts to see that, when they no longer want to keep cycling through joy and sorrow without meaning, when they ask, is there something deeper than this? That's when the seed of awakening begins. You see, not everyone needs a tragedy to wake up. Sometimes, awakening begins in contentment, like someone who's eaten too much and suddenly finds the food no longer tastes good, or someone at a joyful party who feels strangely out of place. I've heard this countless times from older students during our group sharing, "I don't know why, but even though everything in my life is fine, I still feel like something's missing." It's not a lack of money. It's not loneliness. It's something deeper. And no, it's not depression. It's not a crisis. It's a calling with no shape or sound, but one that makes the heart want to pause, turn inward, and understand itself more clearly. And when someone begins asking questions like, "Why do I feel unsettled when I have everything I need? Why do the things that once excited me now feel empty? Why am I so tired of constantly trying to prove something?" that's when we stop being passive players in our own life. We become the observer. And that's a turning point. Because when the mind starts observing itself, the path of spiritual discovery opens up. You don't need to move to a monastery. You don't have to leave your family or the world behind. All it takes is a heart that wants to understand life, not to control it, but to let go a little. A heart that wants to understand itself, not to criticize, but to care. A heart that wants to understand suffering, not to be afraid, but to find a way through. Even Prince Siddhartha, before he became the Buddha, felt that same restlessness. It didn't come from trauma. It came while he was still living in the comfort of his royal palace. Seeing old age, sickness, and death on the streets didn't scare him. It made him question, if every kind of life ends in decay, is there a way beyond this? That question wasn't pessimism. It was the beginning of wisdom. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha once said, "The one who asks the right question has already walked half the path to liberation." Not all of us will sit under a Bodhi tree and become enlightened, but each of us can begin with a quiet afternoon, a moment by the window, a pause at the end of a long day, and the courage to let the question, "So what now?" echo in our heart without shutting it out. In the eyes of Buddhism, those moments are not trivial. They are signals. They are signs that awakening is drawing near. And it doesn't come from books. It doesn't come from someone else. It comes from your life when you're still enough to listen. So if you've ever heard that question inside, even just once, even for a second, maybe you're already standing at the doorway of something truly sacred. A journey that doesn't require you to go far or become someone else. Just come home. 2. Success doesn't heal the emptiness inside. There's something strange that not many people talk about. It's the feeling of loneliness and lack right at the moments when life should feel the most fulfilling. It sounds like a paradox, doesn't it? But really, it's one of the most human truths. And if you're someone who hears this and quietly feels, "That's me," then let me say this clearly. You're not alone. In fact, that feeling has visited people who were once admired by the whole world. They were artists, CEOs, even geniuses, people you'd think had it all. But when you look more closely, you begin to see even they carried an unnamed emptiness inside. Let's take a name most of us know, Steve Jobs, a man who changed global technology. He turned the phone into a lifelong companion. He became a symbol of innovation, creativity, and top-tier success. And yet, in the final years of his life, as he faced illness, Steve Jobs admitted, "I can hire people to drive me or work for me, but I can't hire someone to carry my illness for me. I chased wealth and fame, but as death approached, I realized the most precious things weren't in my bank account. They were in the everyday moments and relationships I had lost." That emptiness didn't come from poverty or lack of success. It came from a forgotten part of life, something left unattended for too long. And it's shocking, isn't it, to think that someone at the very top could feel that much regret. But he did, and he said it not to impress us, but as a wake-up call to anyone chasing achievement at the cost of their own inner life. Now take Jim Carrey, the famous comedian who made millions around the world laugh. At one point, he was one of the highest-paid actors in Hollywood. He had everything people associate with the American dream. But he once said, "I wish everyone could become rich and famous, get everything they ever dreamed of, just so they can see it's not the answer." That wasn't just a warning. It was a confession. a raw truth from someone who reached the end of desire only to find not fulfillment, but a quiet, haunting void. And the truth is, many people are already there. They just don't have the words or the courage to say it. Leonardo da Vinci, the genius who painted the Mona Lisa, felt something similar. On his deathbed, he whispered, "I have offended God and mankind because my work did not reach the quality it should have." Imagine that. A man with vision centuries ahead of his time. A man who left behind a legacy that changed human history, still felt not good enough. Not because he failed, but because deep down, fame and talent couldn't fill what was missing inside. And these aren't just stories about the rich or the famous. This is our story too. The office worker who just got promoted. The single mom who finally bought her first home. The young person who just received recognition in their field. And then, after all that effort, instead of lasting happiness, there's this quiet, unnamed feeling. I worked so hard. So why do I still feel empty? Maybe it's because we've misunderstood something. We think external achievement will heal something internal. We assume that once we have the money, the title, the approval, the inner pain will go away. But reality tells us otherwise. None of that truly fills the hole inside. In Buddhism, this is explained very clearly. The Buddha called it dukkha, a fundamental dissatisfaction built into all worldly experiences. He once taught, even when you get what you want, the mind keeps seeking more. That's why what you have is only temporary. That's where suffering begins. We've been conditioned to believe more success equals more happiness. But it's like drinking seawater when you're thirsty. The more you drink, the thirstier you get. The more success you reach, if you haven't come home to yourself, the louder that not enough becomes. Someone once asked, "So, are you saying we shouldn't try to succeed?" Not at all. Buddhism never discourages effort or growth. What the Buddha points out is this: success is not a cure for emptiness. There's nothing wrong with striving. But if you expect your achievements to be the source of inner peace, you'll always be tired. Healing doesn't come from adding more. It comes from understanding deeper and letting go. Realizing that all things outside of you are temporary, conditional, not the deepest part of who you are. And once you stop asking them to complete you, you make space to turn inward and discover that wholeness was already there. There's a short story the Buddha once told. A man was walking through the forest and found a beautiful basket. He picked it up, delighted, and carried it on his back. Later, he added shiny stones, glittering tools. The basket grew heavier and heavier. By sunset, he was exhausted, so tired he couldn't even enjoy the beauty of the journey. When someone asked, "Why not put some of it down?" he replied, "I thought these things would make me happier." Aren't we the same? We carry a beautiful-looking burden of titles, possessions, achievements, but forget to ask, am I actually lighter? Am I really happier? Or are we just trying to stuff the emptiness, hoping one more success will finally make it disappear? The answer isn't in one more win. It's in pausing and asking, what truly brings lasting peace? And if even those at the top feel still not enough, maybe it's time we stop asking, what else do I need? And start asking, have I lost myself along the way? 3. The purpose of life is not pleasure. It's the end of suffering. There's something that's not easy to admit. But if we're honest with ourselves, it becomes very clear. Life constantly makes us feel like something is missing. Missing what, exactly? It's hard to name, but it's something deep inside. Even when we're traveling, enjoying delicious food, lying on the softest chair. Somewhere in our heart, there's a whisper, "This still isn't it." And what does the modern world tell us to do? Add more. Another vacation. Another unforgettable experience. Another moment of living to the fullest. But strangely, after every more, the emptiness returns, sometimes even louder than before. And that's the moment we need to pause. Not to reject pleasure, but to ask a deeper question. Are we chasing the wrong purpose in life? In one of his talks, someone asked the Buddha, "Bhagava, what is the ultimate purpose of life?" And he answered very simply, "I only teach one thing: suffering and the path to the end of suffering." At first, it sounds too simple. But in truth, that may be the most liberating statement ever made in human history. The Buddha didn't say, "I'm here to help you be happier, more successful, or more joyful." He said, "I'm here to help you be free from suffering." Because happiness, if it arises, naturally blooms when suffering is gone. It doesn't need to be chased. It simply shows up when we remove the layers that have wrapped around our heart for too long. Imagine a room. Inside that room is sunlight, but the windows are covered with thick curtains. Curtains of greed, anger, confusion, craving, attachment. And then we say, "I want light." So we turn on lamps, play music, hang lanterns, add artificial lights. But the true light still doesn't come because the windows are still blocked. The Buddha wasn't teaching us how to create artificial happiness. He was showing us how to pull back the curtains so the light that's already there can finally enter. It's like being thirsty and looking for clean water. But if your cup is already full of salty water, sand, and garbage, pouring in more pure water won't help. The solution isn't to add, it's to empty, to cleanse, to let go. The Buddha called this freedom from craving and delusion. It's not about killing emotions or living a cold, robotic life. It's about seeing clearly the nature of emotions so they no longer control you. When the mind is no longer addicted to pleasure, a deep, effortless peace starts to arise without you trying to force it. In the Four Noble Truths, the very first teaching after his enlightenment, the Buddha didn't give a mystical philosophy. He gave a healing map. 1. There is suffering. 2. There is a cause of suffering. 3. There is an end to suffering. 4. There is a path that leads to that end. That's why Buddhism is not a religion based on blind belief. It's a path of practice. You might never chant a single sutra, but if you live according to the Eightfold Path, you're already practicing. You may never set foot in a temple, but if you're learning to let go of anger, if you're trying to see others through the lens of compassion, you're already unbinding yourself from suffering. There was a time when a monk asked the Buddha, "Bhagava, what if someone practices but hasn't reached nirvana yet? Does it still matter?" And the Buddha replied, "If someone walks through a dry, scorching land and reaches a cool stream, even just one sip brings relief, even if they don't drink the whole thing." Nirvana isn't some far-off mystical realm. In its original meaning, nirvana simply means the extinguishing of the inner fires, the fires of craving, anger, and delusion. And even for a moment, if your mind is no longer being pulled by them, if you feel stillness not because of anything outside, then you've already touched nirvana in daily life. So the purpose of life, as the Buddha taught, is not to collect more happiness, but to understand suffering and to practice the way to end it. Because when suffering ends, joy arises on its own, effortlessly, gently, and with lasting depth. And when we no longer feel like we have to be happy, we start to truly live. A simple meal, a quiet breeze in the afternoon, a small laugh with someone we love. These moments were always there, but only when the mind stops being torn in 10 directions do we see their beauty fully. Someone once asked, "If I stop chasing happiness, won't life feel empty?" And the answer is number. Because when you're no longer controlled by suffering, life becomes simpler, but deeper. Happiness doesn't disappear, it becomes more real, more humble, more steady. Just like when a fever breaks. You don't need medicine to feel better. Your body naturally returns to ease. It's the same with your mind. When the fires of craving, anger, and confusion die down, peace, joy, and loving kindness rise up on their own. No pushing, no comparing, no need to do anything grand. Just be here, fully. We live in a world where happiness is sold as a product, tied to comfort, success, fame, instant pleasure. But what the Buddha taught is the opposite. True happiness doesn't come from adding more. It comes from seeing clearly and letting go. And in that beautiful simplicity, we find freedom. If you've ever had a moment sitting quietly after a long day, taking a deep breath, and suddenly feeling a lightness in your heart for no reason at all, then maybe you've already touched what the Buddha called unconditional peace. And if you felt it once, you can walk toward it again. One breath, one step, one day at a time. Not to chase feelings, but to understand what makes you suffer and how to gently, patiently release it for good. 4. We're not really chasing happiness. We're just running from pain. Have you ever caught yourself scrolling on your phone for an hour not really looking for anything just because you didn't know what else to do? Or maybe you opened the fridge even though you weren't hungry, just because something inside felt empty? Or after a long workday, instead of truly resting, you jumped into Netflix, video games, takeout, almost like a reflex? If so, you're not alone. And maybe, just maybe, you weren't actually looking for pleasure. You were trying to escape something deeper inside. In the middle-length discourses, the Buddha once asked his disciples, if a person is struck by a poisoned arrow, should they sit there analyzing what the arrow is made of, who shot it, where it came from, or should they pull the arrow out first? He paused and then said, human beings are suffering. What matters first is not to talk about happiness, but to clearly understand suffering. And to understand suffering, we need to first look at how desire works. Most people think they're chasing what they like, but if you look closely, you'll see they're actually just trying to escape what they don't like. A person who drinks every night doesn't do it because the drink tastes amazing. They do it because being sober hurts. Someone who always needs to be doing something, saying something, hearing something, it's not because the world is that exciting. It's because silence makes them uneasy. And so many things we label as pleasure are actually ways of forgetting pain for a moment. It's like scratching an itch. You're not enjoying the scratch, you just feel relief from not feeling the itch for a few seconds. But what happens when you keep scratching? The itch doesn't go away. It becomes a wound. The Buddha described this as chasing pleasure in reaction to dukkha, a Pali word that doesn't just mean pain, but a fundamental dissatisfaction with life. Dukkha isn't always obvious suffering. Sometimes, it's a constant sense of lack, like a cup with a crack at the bottom. No matter how much you pour in, it keeps leaking out. And instead of stopping to ask, why is the cup cracked? We just keep pouring. More buying, more eating, more loving, more doing. We're busy treating the symptoms, but we forget to look at the root. There's an old Zen story. A man is walking through a forest when a tiger begins to chase him. He runs to a cliff and grabs a branch, dangling over a steep drop. Above him, the tiger. Below him, death. And just then, a bee flies by and leaves a drop of honey on his hand. He tastes it and smiles. People often tell this story to praise living in the present moment. But if we're honest, maybe it's also a metaphor for distraction. Maybe he wasn't truly present. Maybe he was just trying to forget the fear. We do the same thing. We eat something tasty to forget we're sad. We fall in love to mask the loneliness. We overwork to avoid the quiet. And then we call it happiness. But the truth is, much of what we call happiness is actually just temporary relief from discomfort. It's not real peace, just a pause in the suffering. And because the root causes are still there, that kind of happiness is fragile. It's like having a fever and only taking painkillers without ever addressing what's causing the fever. Sure, the medicine makes us feel better, but when it wears off, the fever hits harder. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha said, "No fire burns like the fire of craving. No river floods like the unsatisfied mind." Craving isn't just wanting more. It's the deep urge to get away from feeling unfulfilled. And the more we try to run from that feeling, the more we become trapped in it. It's like a fish caught on a hook. The more it thrashes, the deeper the hook goes. When we chase pleasure to escape emptiness, that emptiness doesn't leave. It just takes on new forms. Someone once asked during a meditation retreat, "How do I stop chasing pleasure outside myself?" The answer isn't force yourself to quit everything. The answer is see clearly. See that sometimes we eat not because we're hungry, but because we're anxious. We scroll not because we need information, but because we don't want to face ourselves. We enter relationships not to grow together, but because we fear being alone. And the moment we see it clearly, the craving starts to loosen on its own. Because the problem isn't the object we chase. It's the illusion we attach to it, that it will finally fill that space inside. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha said, "Better than 100 years lived without seeing the arising and fading is one day lived with deep understanding of that truth." To see how desire arises and fades, to see how emotions come and go, that's the beginning of freedom. When anxiety shows up, we don't have to react. Just see it. When sadness comes, we can breathe with it. We don't need to push it away. When we stay with ourselves like that, moment by moment, little by little, we stop running. And that's a powerful shift. We're no longer chasing happiness. We're no longer running from pain. We're just being with ourselves. Honestly, gently, mindfully. The Buddha never told us to destroy desire with willpower. He taught us to observe, to understand that nothing outside of us can permanently fill what feels missing inside. And once we see that clearly, happiness is no longer something we chase. It becomes the natural state that arises when the mind is at ease in itself. So maybe the question isn't, how can I get more happiness? Maybe the real question is, what am I running from? What itch am I scratching? And is there a deeper way to heal instead of just scratching forever? 5. The Eightfold Path isn't just for monks. It's a way of living for all of us, right here, in this busy life. One common misunderstanding about Buddhism is the idea that in order to truly practice, you have to leave your family, go to a temple, wear a monk's robe, and live a life free from responsibilities. But if we really understand the Buddha's message, we'll see practice isn't about appearance. It's about how we choose to live moment by moment in our ordinary days. A mother washing dishes in her kitchen, a mechanic repairing a car in the garage, an office worker quietly doing their tasks behind a desk. If their mind is clear, if their actions are rooted in kindness and truth, they are practicing the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path, the 8 core principles of right living, is not some sacred curriculum for people who've renounced the world. It's an incredibly practical guide for people who still have jobs, families, responsibilities, and 1,000 things to juggle. One time, a layperson said to a Zen master, "I'm too busy. I have 3 young kids. Every morning I'm cooking, doing laundry, dropping them off, then working 8 hours. I don't have time to meditate. Can I still practice?" The teacher smiled and replied, "If every morning you pour a cup of water with a calm heart, if you speak gently to your children, if you go to work without deceit, then you are practicing deeper than many who sit in silence, but still carry greed, anger, and delusion." The Buddha didn't create a religion to worship. He offered us a way of life, and the Eightfold Path is that map. Not something to memorize or preach, but something to walk today in your real, messy life. Right view means seeing things clearly, not clouded by emotion or bias. When a mother hears her child crying and doesn't just feel annoyed, but sees the fear underneath the tears, that's right view. Right thought means thinking in a way that causes no harm, no hatred, no blind ambition. When someone insults you, and instead of reacting with revenge, you wonder, what pain might they be carrying? That's right thought. Right speech means speaking with care, no lies, no gossip, no cruelty. When a husband, instead of criticizing the dinner, thanks his wife for her effort, that's right speech. Right action means doing what is good, physically, verbally, mentally, not hurting anyone. Right livelihood means choosing a profession that doesn't harm others, that honors ethics. Earning an honest living, not exploiting or deceiving, that's right livelihood. Right effort is not about doing more, it's about doing the right things. Staying committed to your inner growth even in small steps. Right. Mindfulness is being truly present. Not just during meditation, but while washing dishes, fully aware you're washing dishes. Listening to your child, not just hearing, but really listening, that's mindfulness. Right concentration means training the mind to be steady, not scattered, not pulled by every distraction. Even sitting for a few quiet minutes a day, just breathing, just being plants the seed of right concentration. You see, you don't have to leave the world. You don't need a monk's robe. You don't need to memorize scriptures. Just live mindfully, live kindly, live honestly. And every thought, every word, every action can become your practice. There's a story in the Buddhist scriptures. One day, a man asked the Buddha, "Lord, I'm a businessman. Every day I work to support my family. Can I still walk the path of liberation?" The Buddha nodded and said, "If you earn your money honestly, spend it wisely, and keep your heart free of greed or harm, then you are already on the path." That one answer erased the false boundary between spiritual and everyday life. There's no separation, only a question. Is your mind awake or asleep? In today's world, where everyone's busy, tired, and pulled in 100 directions, the Eightfold Path is not some lofty idea. It's a lifeline. You can be in a noisy city and still keep a quiet space inside. You can be in a cutthroat job and still act with compassion and integrity. And every time mindfulness returns, with a deep breath, a gentle smile, an intentional pause, you come back to yourself. Someone once said, "I'm not good enough to follow all 8 parts of the path." But here's the truth. No one said you had to be perfect. Practice means practice. Practice seeing. Practice understanding. Practice doing. When you make mistakes, practice correcting. When you're tired, practice resting. Then get up and practice again. The Eightfold Path isn't a test. There's no score, no comparison. It's simply a path where you grow to be better than you were yesterday. And the beauty is, when one person lives the path, transformation ripples out to their family, their workplace, their community. A person with right speech makes others feel safe. A person with right livelihood helps create a more ethical world. A person with right concentration radiates peace, even in chaos. So if today life feels too fast, too loud, too messy, pause. You don't need to do something big. Just take a deep breath. Speak a kind word. Be gentle with yourself. And be aware of what you're doing. That alone is the beginning of practice. And in that moment, you're walking the same path the Buddha walked. No one needs to give you permission. All it takes is a sincere heart. 6. Happiness isn't something to chase. It's the natural shade that comes from a life rooted in wisdom. Have you ever stood under the shade of a big tree on a scorching summer day and just felt your whole being relax? There's something so gentle and natural about that kind of coolness. You can't force it. You can't manufacture it. It's simply the quiet result of what's already happened. That tree used to be a tiny seed. It pushed through storms, took root deep in the earth, stood strong through the wind and rain. And now, it offers shade, just by being what it is. Happiness is the same way. It's not the goal. It's the result. It's the natural fruit of a life that's grounded in understanding, in compassion, and in the ability to let go. One day, during a Dharma talk, someone asked the Buddha, "All I want is to live a happy life. What should I do to be happy?" The Buddha didn't give a direct answer. He simply smiled, looked into that person's eyes, and said, "Learn to understand suffering. When you truly see the nature of suffering, the path to happiness opens by itself." That answer confused many. Some were even disappointed. Why? Because most of us are looking for a shortcut. We want a formula. Happiness equals money plus love plus a nice house plus good health. But life doesn't work like math. And happiness doesn't come from what you have. It comes from how you see. There are people who spend their whole lives chasing happiness, changing jobs, changing homes, changing relationships, changing cities, and still feel empty inside. Because what they're chasing isn't real happiness. It's just an idea of happiness. True happiness isn't a fleeting thrill. It's not a quick high from getting something you wanted. It's the quiet peace that comes when you truly see and accept yourself and this life. There was an old Zen master who sat under the same tree every morning. Rain or shine, he sat, sipped tea, and smiled at the birds. One day, a young man asked, "Why do you just sit here? Isn't it boring? Isn't there something fun you could be doing?" The master replied, "You're sad because you think happiness has to feel exciting. But for me, just being alive, breathing, and seeing the sky is more than enough." You see, Buddhism doesn't teach you to find happiness. It teaches you to understand suffering, to look into its roots, and from there, transform it into wisdom and compassion. And once wisdom arises, happiness follows naturally. Like tending a garden. You can't force a flower to bloom, but you can nourish the soil, pull the weeds, water it, and let the sun in. And one day, without forcing it, the flower appears. It's the same with your life. If you take care of the basics, when your mind isn't greedy, you're not pulled around by endless wants. When your mind isn't angry, you're not burned by resentment and envy. When your mind isn't confused, you can see the world clearly, without illusion. These are the three roots the Buddha talked about: greed, hatred, and illusion. Uprooting them is liberation. But roots also need nourishment. That nourishment? Loving kindness, mindfulness, wisdom. Loving kindness to care for yourself and others. Mindfulness to live fully in this moment, not dragged by the past or worried about the future. Wisdom to know what really matters. When you live that kind of life, you'll realize happiness isn't a finish line you have to run toward. It's something real, something already sprouting, right here and now. A simple cup of tea, if you drink it with mindfulness, tastes better than the finest wine. The sound of rain, if your heart is calm, becomes a healing song. Someone once said to me, "I've achieved so much, but I still feel empty." And that's true, because if the heart is hollow, the whole world can't fill it. But when the roots are cared for, the shade will come, and happiness stops being a dream and starts being a breath you can actually feel. So if you're feeling exhausted today, tired from trying so hard to be happy, pause. Don't ask, "How can I be happier?" Ask, "What am I nurturing at the roots of my life?" Don't chase the shade. Plant the tree. And one day when you least expect it, the shade will find you. Softly, naturally, like a gift you didn't have to chase, but completely deserved to receive. 7. The more you chase happiness, the further it slips away, because attachment always leads to suffering. Dear friend, we live in an age where everyone is talking about happiness. From TED Talks to best-selling self-help books, we're constantly being told, think positive, be grateful every day, love yourself, live fully. Sounds good, right? But here's something few people dare to admit. The more you force yourself to be happy, the lonelier and emptier you might actually feel. A well-known study from Yale University found something surprising. People who put pressure on themselves to be happy often feel more stressed, more anxious, and more disappointed in themselves, especially on days when they just don't feel happy enough. And that's the problem. We've misunderstood happiness. We think it's about getting something, but in truth, it's about letting go. That's exactly what the Buddha taught more than 2,600 years ago. In the simplest but most powerful way, attachment leads to suffering. Letting go brings joy. Let's look at a regular day. In the morning, you scroll through your phone and see someone posting about their vacation in the Maldives. You feel a little sting. Why don't I get to live like that? At lunch, you see a friend posting a happy photo with their family. You wonder, why isn't my family ever like that? Later, you see someone younger than you just bought a house. Your heart sinks a little, and by the time you go to bed, you're not exactly unhappy, but something feels heavy. Why? Because modern society has taught you you're supposed to be happy all the time. And if you're not, it must mean something's wrong with you. But Buddhism says the opposite. You're not supposed to feel happy. Emotions are temporary. The mind flows like a river. What we need isn't to force ourselves to feel joy, but to recognize suffering, understand it, and move through it with awareness. In the Buddha's very first teaching, the Four Noble Truths, he didn't start by saying, "Here's how to feel better." He began with this. This is suffering. This is the cause of suffering. This is the end of suffering. And this is the path to its end. He never promised life would always feel good. He simply taught that if we understand suffering deeply, we don't have to be crushed by it. There's a story of a woman who came to a Zen master, frustrated. She said, "I've read so many books on gratitude and positive thinking, But the harder I try to be happy, the more exhausted I feel." The master didn't answer right away. He handed her a glass full of water and said, "Hold this glass in the air and don't lower it." At first, she was fine. A few minutes in, her arms started to ache. After 10 minutes, she winced. 20 minutes later, her hand was shaking and water spilled over. Then the master said, "This is what happens when you cling to an idealized image of happiness. When you force yourself to always feel okay, the pressure itself becomes a burden." In modern psychology, there's a name for this: the paradox of happiness. The more people demand happiness, the more disappointed they often become. Because life is a mix of light and dark. And every time we resist sadness, we miss a chance to grow. The Buddha once told a parable about a man struck by a poisoned arrow. When asked what he'd do, first remove the arrow or ask who shot it. He replied, "Pull out the arrow. If you waste time asking who, why, where, you'll die before you get an answer." In today's world, that means this: don't rush to ask, "Why am I not happy?" First, look directly at what's causing you pain. Maybe it's comparison. Maybe it's unrealistic expectations. Maybe it's craving something that isn't real. And gently remove it through mindfulness and clarity. So if today you're not feeling joyful, that's okay. If you don't feel as happy as the world expects you to be, take a breath and let that pressure go. Because true happiness isn't something you have to maintain. It's a deep understanding that suffering is part of the human experience. When you can smile through an imperfect day, when you're not afraid to feel sad, when you no longer need to be happy to feel okay, that's when a quiet, steady happiness begins to take root. And this is where ancient wisdom meets modern science. Psychologists say, don't put pressure on your emotions. Buddhism teaches, every emotion becomes suffering if we cling to it. How beautiful it is that after thousands of years, this old wisdom still lights the path for our modern lives. In the end, what both the ancient sages and today's researchers seem to agree on is this: happiness isn't something we earn by running faster, gathering more, or pretending to be fine. It's not a feeling we have to lock in place. It's the moment we accept life as it is. When we no longer need to hide our pain. When we stop trying to prove we're okay. When we let the heart soften. When we say, this is enough. In a world that constantly urges us to smile more, achieve more, be more, awakening becomes like a lotus rising from the mud. It brings us back to the truth. The more we chase happiness, the more we suffer. But the more we let go of attachment, the closer we come to peace. And that, dear friend, is the light of wisdom, the kind that doesn't just help us survive, but helps us live deeply, clearly, and fully. If something in today's reflection touched your heart even just a little, I invite you to share this seed of mindfulness with others. Please like the video, share it with someone you love, and subscribe to Buddhism Seeds, where together we plant understanding, compassion, and peace. And in the comments below, let us know what you're reflecting on, because your sincere thoughts might just be a light for someone else who's lost their way. Thank you for being here. May your day be gentle and your life be rooted in letting go, so that happiness can finally bloom naturally.